one must imagine Sisyphus happy. Chances are you've seen this line stamped under a screenshot of someone smiling through a terrible day, or dropped, half ironically, in a comment section under a video that has nothing to do with ancient Greece. It has become the internet's favorite way of saying, "Life is pointless, but I'm fine with it." Almost nobody quoting it knows where it came from, who Sisyphus actually was, what he did to deserve his punishment, or why a French philosopher would insist he was happy while doing it. To understand any of that, we have to go back roughly 3,000 years to a king who thought he was cleverer than the gods themselves. Sisyphus ruled Ephyra, the city we now call Corinth, and by most measures he was a spectacular king. Trade flourished, the treasury grew, and the city prospered under him. He was also, quietly, a monster. Travelers who arrived at his gates bearing gifts of goodwill were murdered where they stood. At some point, he married his own niece. None of this happened in secret. The gods noticed, and they were furious. What they underestimated was how far Sisyphus was willing to go, and how much confidence a man can have when he genuinely believes the rules don't apply to him. The trouble began the day Zeus disguised himself as an eagle and carried off a river nymph named Aegina. Her father, the river god Asopus, tore through the countryside looking for her and eventually landed on Sisyphus's doorstep. Sisyphus, always looking for an angle, offered a trade. He would tell Asopus exactly where his daughter had gone in exchange for a permanent spring of fresh water running through Ephyra. Asopus agreed. Sisyphus talked, and Zeus, humiliated in front of the entire pantheon, decided this insolent little king needed to disappear, permanently. Zeus sent Thanatos, Death himself, to drag Sisyphus down to the underworld. Most people, chained by death, stay chained. Sisyphus asked Thanatos one small favor first. Could he see exactly how the chains worked? Thanatos, who presumably had never been asked this before, obliged, and Sisyphus used the demonstration to lock Thanatos in his own shackles instead. With Death himself imprisoned, nobody on earth could die. Soldiers survived beheadings. Sacrifices refused to stay dead. The god of war, Ares, found this unbearable. A battlefield with no casualties has no stakes, so he personally freed Thanatos and finished the job Zeus had started. Even facing real death this time, Sisyphus had one more move prepared. He instructed his wife not to perform his funeral rites. No offerings, no proper burial. When his soul arrived in the underworld, he complained to Persephone, queen of the dead, that his own wife had disrespected him by leaving him unburied. Persephone, moved by the apparent injustice, granted him temporary leave to return to the living world and punish her. Sisyphus went back to Ephyra and simply stayed there, living out his days as if none of it had happened. Twice now, he had out-argued the machinery of death itself. The gods did not offer a third chance. Hermes, messenger of Olympus, eventually came to collect what was owed and dragged Sisyphus back to face Hades and Persephone directly. His punishment, on paper, sounded almost simple. Push a massive boulder to the top of a mountain. In practice, every single time he neared the summit, the boulder slipped from his grip and thundered back down to the bottom, forcing him to start over, forever. Of all the punishments handed down in Greek mythology, and there are far more gruesome ones, this is the one that stuck in the public imagination. Not because it's the cruelest, because it's the most familiar. Nearly 2,400 years after this story was first told, a French-Algerian writer named Albert Camus looked at Sisyphus and saw something other than a cautionary tale. Camus was born into poverty in 1913, lost his father almost immediately after, and was later diagnosed with tuberculosis, a disease that forced him to sit permanently with the fact of his own mortality while still a young man. He came of age watching the world tear itself apart in the Second World War, and what struck him wasn't just the violence, it was how arbitrary it all was. There was no grand design behind any of it, just chaos, dressed up as history. Out of that experience came Camus' central idea, laid out in his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, the absurd. Not absurd as in silly. Camus meant something closer to a permanent standoff. On one side, human beings desperately want their lives to mean something. On the other side, the universe offers no evidence that it does. That gap, between our hunger for purpose and a universe that stays completely silent about it, is the absurd. And Sisyphus, pushing a boulder toward a summit it will never actually reach, is that gap made physical. Most philosophies built around meaninglessness end in despair or in some kind of escape hatch, an afterlife, a system, a promise that things get better later. Camus refused both. His answer was to face the absurd directly and rebel against it, not by pretending the boulder has a point, but by choosing to live fully anyway, creating meaning ourselves instead of waiting for the universe to hand us one. Sisyphus, in Camus' telling, has given up on the idea of a better tomorrow entirely. There is no afterlife waiting for him, no version of this task that ends. All he has is the weight in his hands, right now, in this moment. And Camus insists that in that total presence, in owning the task completely, Sisyphus becomes free. Camus even pictures him smiling on the walk back down the mountain before starting over. Not because the task changed, because Sisyphus did. So what does revolting against the absurd look like outside of a Greek myth? Camus pointed out that most of us default to option 1. We invent an escape hatch so we don't have to face meaninglessness head-on. Maybe it's religion and the promise of an afterlife. Maybe it's a number in a bank account you're chasing toward retirement, the belief that peace arrives once you finally have enough. Camus wasn't hostile to any of that personally. He just refused to build his philosophy on a debt that never gets paid off. If your peace depends on something that only arrives later, when exactly does later arrive? Chase money, and there's always a bigger number above you. Chase happiness, and there's always a better day than today. Chase power, and there's no ceiling at all. It's Sisyphus's boulder with a suit on. Option 2 is what Camus actually recommends. Stop treating today as a rehearsal for some future payoff, and start treating the doing of the thing as the entire point. Not living as good as possible, good is just a scoreboard someone else invented, but living as much as possible, fully inside whatever you're doing right now. A musician doesn't only enjoy the standing ovation, something in them loves the actual practicing. A runner doesn't only want to cross the line. The miles themselves are part of what they're chasing. Camus is arguing that this is available to everyone, in every task, including the ones that never technically finish. We are, most of us, already Sisyphus, not cursed by the gods, just caught in the same basic loop. Work toward a goal, reach it, and immediately need a new one. The paycheck, the next promotion, the next milestone. If your happiness is parked at the top of that hill, you will never actually arrive because the hill keeps growing new peaks. Camus' whole argument comes down to a shift most people never make. Stop waiting for the top of the mountain to feel like something, and start noticing what it feels like to be climbing it. That's the whole trick. That's the only place any of us have ever actually been happy. Not at the summit. On the way up,